Picking up from the end of the previous chapter, we see Hawks and vestiges are now coming into their hospital room. We saw them eavesdropping outside, and then they come into the room and say that they were. And while it was sus, it's just an easier way to get these characters up to speed on everything. They basically say that they've been trying to collect information on Dabi, and now they have, the most they've ever had essentially at this point, but they're still trying to put the pieces together. Mainly trying to figure out how Toya survived the whole big, explosion, prominence burn accident thing, and then what exactly led him to becoming Dabi, because I guess that's the last piece of this story that's unaccounted for at this point, because we don't know how he survived other than him just not dying. We don't know what he did to get away from that whole explosion scene, because in the previous chapter we saw Endeavor going to that spot, looking around the burned woods and everything, and previously he said that he had only found a piece of his jawbone or something. We need to know how he got out of there, how he went on to live despite receiving those crazy burns, how he got the stitches, and then I guess his journey to becoming the prolific criminal that he is now, and then what eventually led him to meeting Giran, I suppose, because that brings us to the point of the story where Dabi was first introduced, and that's at the end of season 2 when we see him meet up with Shigaraki. That was because of Giran. Giran somehow knew Dabi beforehand. I mean, Giran's an underworld broker, so he just knows criminals and stuff. But anyway, the history of that relationship needs to be established, which, considering they're bringing that up here, how he became Dabi, I'm assuming that we're going to get another flashback on him before everything is wrapped up at this point. I'm assuming that we're definitely going to get more flashbacks on Dabi. Maybe it won't be through the eyes of the Todoroki family at this point. Maybe when we come back to the villains, which they talk about in this chapter, and we'll get to that, then maybe Dabi will start reminiscing possibly, and then we'll get that final piece of the puzzle. So at this point, Hawk starts updating Endeavor on everything that's been happening in the story since Endeavor has been in the hospital, I guess. And he says the locations of Shigaraki, Dabi, Toga, Spinner, Skeptic, 132 members of the Liberation Army, and the 7 near-high-end Nomus are all unknown. So not only are they unknown to the heroes, but also to the audience as well. We don't really know what's going on at this point. We kind of just saw what happened at the end when All For One broke out all of the prisoners from Tartarus and those other prisons. When he was remote controlling Shigaraki's body, then he got his own body out, and we don't really know what happened after that point. In my opinion, it was kind of implied that it's possible that they all split ways or partially split ways. All For One maybe took a separate group, maybe Muscular and Moonfish and that one girl that we didn't get the name on possibly, with the near high ends, and then maybe he went to his own thing, and then maybe Shigaraki and the base League of Villains went somewhere else. Not really sure. I mean, we did see Dabi in the last couple of chapters, and he was in some kind of it looked like an abandoned house or mansion or something, and we don't know if Dabi was with the League of Villains at that point, but he probably was. And also Toga, she's completely unaccounted for at this point. We didn't even see her reunite with the League of Villains after the war was over. We kind of just saw her doing her own thing with Uraraka, and then to my knowledge, she never showed up again. So yeah, a lot of question marks going on with the villain side of things, but like I said before, I'm sure we're going to come back to them eventually. That's usually how this story works and why I really like this series so much. So then Hawks also says several pivotal members of the Hero Public Safety Commission have perished, been severely injured, or otherwise rendered unable to enact their duties properly, and heroes, seeing that the situation isn't getting any better, are submitting their resignations in left and right. So I talked about this in my spoilers video, but I'm pretty sure he's referring to, or at least partly to, that moment that we saw in a flashback that was taking place before the Liberation Mansion raid. We saw the commission meeting up with Redestro, but it was actually one of Twice's clones, and then he went, stress Hulk mode and then just completely wrecked them. So at least some of what he's talking about here is tied to that event. So then we're coming to the part of the chapter that I personally found most intriguing, where he says, as it is, the government's requesting for relief and help from heroes from other countries. But with the commission at a standstill, the process of sending in heroes is a mess. And then we see silhouettes of other heroes from other countries, and I was able to point out at least one of them for sure, and that's Ectoplant. We saw this guy in the My Hero 2 Heroes movie at the beginning with the flashback with young All Might and David Shield, and that hero is from America, so we know at least one of them is coming from America, or allegedly. It says that it's at a standstill and the processing is a mess, so I guess that just means it's not going to happen immediately, but it will eventually happen, which is definitely going to make this series way more interesting in my opinion. But as for the other silhouettes, I have no idea who these are, and I don't think we've seen them before. It's possible possible that one of these silhouettes is Cow Lady, the other hero that we saw with Ectoplant in the Two Heroes movie. But the other three, I have no idea, but they look pretty cool, or at least their silhouette. But after this, Hawks and Best Jeanist are just like, you know what, we're gonna help you out with this Dabi stuff. You know, it's gonna be a group up between the top three to take him down and figure out everything. And this kind of brings the Todoroki family together, at least momentarily, more so than they ever have been. And then Hawks says the first step is explaining yourself to everyone. You can't dodge Dabi's accusations now that they're out there. So that's gonna be super interesting. I'm looking forward to what Endeavor says when he makes like his big public statement and how the public receives that. But then he also says, I briefly thought over your potential response and what to mention, but there was one odd factor. What exactly is One for All? And then we find out that like the public is starting to ask about One for All, because apparently through the grapevine and through how the news and the footage from the TV and all of this stuff linked together, it somehow came out to the public that One for All was mentioned, and people are like trying to put the pieces together, like, what's that? Is it tied to All for One? And then after he mentions this, Endeavor says Deku. But then we cut away from that, we go back to the Class 1A side of things. Then we see Bakugo like yelling. Before he was able to reach Izuku's room, he was stopped by Mineta Sato and Tsuyu and like wrapped up. Then we see Jiro and Uraraka there. They're also worried about what's going on with Deku because he's still in a coma. He hasn't woken up yet. Then we see Hawks and Best Jeanist coming down the hallway going towards Izuku's room. And Hawks says, I wanted to speak with Izuku. But then Ida says, All Might requested to be alone with him for now. So this is going back to Hawks asking Endeavor about, you know, what's One for All. And he said Deku. So I guess, you know, Endeavor gave him as much information as he had, which was like, hey, Shigaraki was interested in One for All. And Izuku was like, oh, he's after me. So, you know, ask Deku what that is, because it seems like he probably knows. But then we cut inside of Izuku's room and we see All Might by his side. And he's like touching his cast. And he says, I feel it within young Midoriya, within One for All. Right now, you're having a chat with the previous holders, aren't you? And that's where the chapter ends. So this is super exciting as well. So when he says you're having a chat with the previous holders, we obviously know what's going on here. He's talking to the vestiges, the previous users of One for All. This is usually what happens when Izuku's unconscious or something like this. And now that he's in a coma, I'm sure this is the best environment to be in for that type of stuff. But when he says the previous holders, what exactly does that mean? Is he talking to all of them? He's already talked to a couple of them, obviously, at this point, but there's a few that he hasn't, such as the fourth one, the quirk that he just recently got in the war, Danger Sense. So I'm assuming that he's definitely going to be talking to him, but is he also going to be talking to the sixth user? He hasn't talked to him yet. Or is he going to be talking to the second and third users, the most intriguing ones by far? And if you're not aware of why that is, well, first of all, it's because they're the only ones that are like shadowed out of the previous users when we see them in his vision. But also the whole big time travel, crazy, polarizing theory surrounding these two characters, which I'll make an entire video dedicated to, or at least the updated version of it. But that would be really wild if he not only talks to the fourth user in the next chapter, but also the sixth and the second and third. I mean, I kind of want it, but also am willing to wait more for it, because I don't necessarily think that we're at the right part in the story yet for at least the second and third users to be revealed yet. Considering how secretive and mysterious it's been up until this point, maybe wait until a little longer to reveal that stuff. And it's not even because I want the time travel theory to be true. I don't really care if it's right or wrong. I do think it's pretty interesting, and I hope that it's right. Just for the greater narrative, you know, for us to have more reveals, you know, down the line, maybe wait for that stuff a little longer. But it is possible, of course, just the mask comes off and then we're introduced to the fourth, the sixth, the second, and the third in the next chapter, which, I don't know, just like I said, seems unlikely at this point. But let me know what you think is going to happen. Who do you think he's going to be talking to in the next chapter? And if you like this review, guys, please give it a like and please subscribe if you haven't already. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one.